Welcome to Scoli Sleep Stories. Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable. Let the day soften around you and settle in for a calm documentary made for curious minds. If these stories help you rest, learn, or simply enjoy a quieter part of the day, please consider liking this episode and subscribing to the channel. Now, when you are ready, let us begin. Chapter 1: Arrival at the Monastery Gate. Imagine a road in Western Europe, many centuries ago, winding gently between fields and low green hills. It is the kind of road made slowly by many feet, many hooves, and many wooden wheels. In dry weather, pale dust rises from it and settles softly on hems and sandals. After rain, the road holds the prints of oxen, carts, and travelers, and the earth gives off a deep, cool scent. On either side, the countryside moves at an unhurried pace. Sheep graze in a pasture where the grass is short and silvered by the wind. Beyond them, an orchard spreads its orderly rows, apple and pear trees bending slightly under their leaves. Near the edge of a wood, rooks call from dark branches, and swallows dip low over the fields, turning in the open air with quiet ease. Ahead, partly hidden by trees and rising ground, there is a monastery. In the Middle Ages, many monasteries stood in rural places such as this, among farms, woods, streams, and meadows. Others were closer to towns, roads, or river crossings, where travelers passed more often. Each house had its own character, shaped by its order, its region, its wealth, and its long history. This one is a well-established abbey, a large monastery led by an abbot. The abbot is the head of the community of monks, responsible for guiding its life of prayer, work, reading, and hospitality. At first, the abbey appears only as a pale line of stone beyond the fields. Then, as the road rises, more of it comes into view. There are outer walls, not necessarily built like a fortress, but strong enough to mark the boundary between the open road and the ordered precinct within. A precinct is simply the enclosed area belonging to the monastery. Inside it may be barns, gardens, workshops, guest rooms, stables, kitchens, and quiet paths leading toward the church and cloister. The walls are warmed by the afternoon sun. Their stones are uneven in color, gray, honey, brown, and soft green where moss has settled in the shaded joints. Near the base of the wall, small plants grow where wind and birds have carried seeds. The scent of hay drifts from a nearby barn. Somewhere not far away, there is wood smoke, thin and blue, rising from a hearth or bakehouse. There is also the faint fragrance of herbs, perhaps mint or thyme, carried from a garden just inside the enclosure. Then a bell rings. It is not a sharp sound. It moves outward slowly, across the fields and over the road, passing through the orchard and along the hedges. The sound seems to belong to the stones, the sky, and the turning day. In a monastery, bells help shape time. They call the monks to prayer, mark the hours, and remind the whole community that the day has a pattern. The road leads toward the gatehouse. A gatehouse is the building at the main entrance, the place where the outside world meets the monastery. It may have a room above or beside the archway, and a wooden gate set with iron hinges. The hinges are dark and broad, made by a smith's hand, and the wood has been smoothed by years of weather and use. Travelers of many kinds might come to such a gate. A pilgrim walking for religious reasons may arrive with a staff and a small bundle. A messenger might bring a letter sealed with wax. A poor person might ask for food or help. A merchant may seek permission to speak with the cellarer, the monk who oversees supplies. A noble guest might arrive with servants and horses. Not everyone would be received in exactly the same way, and customs varied from place to place. Still, hospitality was an important part of monastic life, especially in houses following the rule of Saint Benedict. Near the gate is the porter. The porter is the person responsible for the gate, watching who comes and goes, answering knocks, and receiving visitors with care. In some monasteries, he might be a monk. In others, the work could involve servants or helpers as well. His task is both practical and gentle. He keeps order, and he also offers the first welcome. The gate opens slowly on its iron hinges. Within, the abbey precinct is quieter than the road, though not silent. A cart creaks somewhere near the barns. Doves murmur under the eaves. From a workshop comes the muted sound of a tool set down on wood. The air carries many small signs of daily life: damp stone, warm bread, straw, wool, garden soil, and the faint sweetness of beeswax. A path leads inward. To one side are low buildings used for storage and work. There may be a stable for horses belonging to guests, a barn for grain, and sheds where tools are kept. Farther off, kitchen gardens lie in neat beds. Their leaves catch the light, and the soil between them is dark from recent watering. Beyond the gardens, fruit trees stand in rows, and bees move slowly among late flowers. The porter speaks softly, as one accustomed to the calm of this place. He explains only what is needed. The church lies ahead, he says, beyond the inner court. The guest house is to one side, where travelers may be received. The monks will soon be gathering again, for the bell has marked another part of the day. As you walk farther inside, the buildings gradually arrange themselves before you. There are roofs of tile or thatch, depending on the structure. There are stone walls, timber doors, narrow windows, and paths worn smooth by generations of footsteps. The abbey is not one single building, but a small world, a place of prayer, labor, learning, care, and routine. The bell's last note fades. In its place comes a softer rhythm: feet on stone, a bird crossing the roofline, the distant murmur of voices, then quiet again. The outer road remains behind the gate, with its dust, its mud, and its long path between fields. Ahead lies the monastery itself, ordered around church and cloister, garden and hall, light and shadow, and so the visit begins, gently, at the threshold. Chapter 2. The Shape of the Monastery. Within the monastery gate, the world becomes more ordered. The road that crossed the fields now gives way to a quieter arrangement of stone paths, timber doors, low walls, and roofs of tile or thatch. A medieval monastery was not simply one building, but a small community gathered into a careful pattern. In many Benedictine houses of Western Europe, especially in the 11th to 13th centuries, the buildings were placed so that prayer, reading, work, meals, care, and hospitality could all follow one another in a steady rhythm. Customs differed from place to place. A monastery in a green English valley might not look exactly like one in Burgundy, or in the German lands, or in northern Italy. A wealthy abbey could have large stone buildings, wide barns, and a well-stocked library. A smaller house might be plainer, with fewer rooms and simpler materials. Orders also differed. Benedictines, Cistercians, Cluniacs, Carthusians, and others each had their own habits and preferences. Yet in many monasteries one pattern appears again and again. The church stands at the heart, and beside it lies the cloister. The church is usually the spiritual and architectural center of the monastery. Its walls rise higher than the others. Its roof may be steep and dark against the sky. Its tower, if it has one, can be seen from the fields beyond the outer wall. Here the monks gather many times each day for prayer and for Mass, the central act of Christian worship. The church may be plain or richly decorated, depending on the community. It may have carved stone, painted walls, or windows of colored glass. Or it may be simple, with pale stone, clear light, and little ornament. In either case, it gives shape to the life around it. Beside the church is the cloister. A cloister is a covered walkway around a courtyard. The word can mean the walkway itself, or sometimes the enclosed area of the monastery as a whole. Here let it be a square or nearly square passage, roofed against rain and sun, open on one side to a green inner court. Stone arches stand in a row, forming an arcade. Through them one can see a patch of grass, perhaps a small tree, perhaps a fountain or well. Sunlight lies in pale rectangles on the paving stones. In damp weather, the stone gives off a cool, earthy scent. In dry weather, the shadows of the arches move slowly with the day. The cloister is both practical and peaceful. It links the main building so that the monks can pass from one duty to another without crossing the open yard. From the church to the meeting room, from the meeting room to the dining hall, from the dining hall toward the kitchen, from the dormitory back to the church. Again and again the same paths are walked. Wool robes brush softly against stone, wooden doors, polished by many hands, open and close with a muted sound. The cloister is a kind of map, a calm square by which the monastery understands itself. On one side of the cloister, often near the church, is the chapter house. The chapter house is the meeting room of the community. Its name comes from the custom of reading a chapter, or section, From the Rule of Saint Benedict, the guide for monastic life written in the 6th century. Here the monks might gather in the morning to hear readings, receive instructions, and discuss the daily concerns of the house. The room may be vaulted in stone, with benches along the walls. Light enters softly. Voices are low. The chapter house is not a grand public hall, but a place where the community listens and attends to its shared order. Another side of the cloister leads toward the refectory. The refectory is the dining hall. The word may sound formal, but its meaning is simple. It is where the monks eat together. Long tables and benches stand in rows. A lectern, a stand for a book, may be set where one monk can read aloud during the meal. The smell of bread sometimes drifts from nearby rooms. There may be barley, beans, herbs, fish, cheese, or pottage, depending on season, rule, and region. The refectory is not only a place of food, but a place of quiet community, where eating is folded into the same rhythm as prayer and work. Close by is the kitchen, warmer and busier than the stone walkways. Here are hearths, pots, baskets, kneading boards, and the scent of smoke and broth. In a larger monastery, the kitchen might serve not only the monks, but also guests, workers, and the sick in the infirmary, though some houses had separate kitchens for different groups. Bread, ale, vegetables, and simple stews required steady preparation. Even in a place devoted to prayer, meals depended on hands that washed, chopped, stirred, carried, baked, and cleaned. Above or beside part of the cloister may be the dormitory. A dormitory is a sleeping room, and in earlier Benedictine houses, it was often communal, shared by many monks. Sometimes a stair or passage led from the dormitory directly into the church, so that the community could go easily to night prayer. Sleeping arrangements changed over time and differed from one monastery to another. Some later houses developed more private spaces, but the idea remained that the monk's daily life was shared, ordered, and close to the church. A little farther from the busiest center might be the infirmary. The infirmary is the place for caring for the sick, the elderly, or those recovering strength. It might have its own small chapel, garden, kitchen, or warming space, especially in a prosperous abbey. Medieval care was not medicine in the modern sense, but it could include rest, warmth, food, herbal preparations, and attentive service. The infirmary reminds us that a monastery was not only a place of discipline and learning, it was also a household, with bodies that aged, hands that tired, and neighbors who needed care. In a wealthier house, there may be a scriptorium, a place where books are copied by hand, or at least a library where manuscripts are kept in chests or cupboards. Not every monastery had a large room full of scribes, and by the later Middle Ages, many books were also made in towns and commercial workshops. Still, monasteries did preserve and copy many texts, scripture, prayers, commentaries, saints' lives, legal records, and sometimes works of grammar, medicine, or older learning. The library is a quiet room in the mind of the monastery, a place where parchment, ink, and memory are gathered. Beyond the cloister square lie other parts of the precinct. There may be a guest house for visitors and pilgrims, set where guests can be welcomed without entering every private part of the monastery. Hospitality was important in the Rule of Saint Benedict, though it was shaped by resources and custom. There may be workshops for carpentry, candle making, brewing, baking, or mending. There may be barns, stables, a brew house, sheds for tools, and storehouses for grain. Gardens spread in patches of green, vegetables for the table, herbs for the kitchen and infirmary, orchards for apples, pears, or plums, according to climate. Medieval people sometimes imagined ideal designs for monasteries. One famous example is the plan of St. Gall, a drawing that shows a complete monastic complex with church, cloister, gardens, workshops, guest spaces, and many other buildings. It is a beautiful guide to what a well-ordered monastery might contain, yet it was not a universal blueprint. Real monasteries grew slowly, shaped by hillsides, rivers, older buildings, gifts of land, repairs, fashions, and changing needs. Their plans were living arrangements, not perfect diagrams. And so, as you stand again in the cloister, the monastery begins to make sense. The church rises beside you. The chapter house waits in quiet stone. The refectory holds the memory of bread and warm pottage. The dormitory rests above or beyond. The infirmary, guest house, gardens, barns, and workshops extend outward like gentle circles around the center. There is order here, but not stiffness. The stones have been worn by many feet. The doors have darkened where hands have touched them. The air carries beeswax from the church, wool from the robes, bread from the kitchen, and damp stone from the shaded walks. Then from the tower or a small bell frame, a bell begins to sound. Its note moves through the cloister arches and over the green courtyard. It does not hurry. It simply marks the hour, drawing the mind from the shape of the buildings toward the shape of the day. Chapter 3. Bells and the Hours. In a medieval monastery, time moves with a different kind of measure. It is not hurried along by the ticking of a clock on a wall, for in many earlier monasteries, mechanical clocks are not yet common. Time is read in quieter ways. It is read in the paling of the eastern sky, in the length of a shadow across the cloister walk, in the burning down of a candle, in the slow dripping of water through a simple water clock, and in the practiced attention of those who have watched many days unfold. Most of all, time is carried by the bell. The bell hangs high in the tower or in a simple belfry, where its sound can travel over roofs, gardens, barns, and fields. In morning mist, its voice seems to float before it arrives. It moves across the orchard, over the herb beds, along the outer wall, and into the stone passages, where the monks are already stirring. The sound is not only a signal, it is a shared breath for the whole community. It tells everyone, gently and clearly, that the next part of the day has come. The life of the monastery is shaped by the divine office. The divine office means the set times of prayer throughout the day and night. In a Benedictine house and in many other Western monasteries, these prayers form a steady circle. The monks gather again and again to chant psalms, readings, and prayers. A psalm is a sacred song or poem from the Bible, and the psalms are at the heart of the daily prayer. The names of the prayer times are old and simple once they are heard in order. Matins, sometimes called vigils, comes in the night or very early morning. Lauds belongs to the first light of dawn. Prime is for the early part of the day. Terce comes in the middle of the morning. Sext is at midday when the sun is high. Non belongs to the middle of the afternoon. Vespers is evening prayer, as daylight softens. Compline is the final prayer before rest, when the community gathers once more before the long quiet of night. These names do not need to be held tightly. They are like stones along a path. The monks know them by walking them, day after day. The exact timing changes with the seasons. Medieval people often divided the daylight into hours that lengthened and shortened as the year turned. A summer day, with its long golden light, gives more space between dawn and evening. A winter day is brief, and the prayers seem closer together, gathered under a low sky. The bell still calls, but the world around it changes. Birdsong in spring, warm stone in summer, leaves in autumn, frost on the tiles in winter. So the monastery lives by a rhythm both firm and flexible. The pattern remains, but the light through which it passes is always changing. Before a prayer office, the movement begins softly. A lantern is lifted, a door opens on its iron hinge. Sandaled feet or soft shoes find the familiar stones. Robes brush against walls and benches. In the dim corridor, one small flame may reveal the curve of an arch, the worn edge of a step, the pale face of a wooden door polished by many hands. No one needs to hurry. The bell is spoken, and the path is known. From the dormitory, from the cloister, from the chapter house or garden or workroom, the monks move toward the church. They have walked this way countless times. Their bodies remember the turn at the cloister corner, the cool draft near the church door, the slight change in sound as they pass from open walkway into enclosed stone. There is a hush before chant begins. It is not an empty silence. It is full of small sounds, a page being opened, a breath drawn in, a sleeve settling, a foot placed carefully on the floor. Then the first notes rise. The chant is not meant to entertain. It is prayer shaped into melody. It flows in a single line, rising and falling, without the harmonies familiar to later music. In the dimness, the sound gathers under the arches and returns softened, as if the stones themselves have learned the tune. Between the offices, the community turns to other tasks. There is reading, there is work, there are meals, there is care for guests, tending of gardens, copying of books, sweeping of floors, baking of bread, mending of cloth. A later phrase often used to summarize Benedictine life is ora et labora, meaning pray and work. It is a helpful summary, though it is not a direct quotation from the rule of Saint Benedict. The rule itself is fuller and more detailed, guiding a life of prayer, obedience, reading, humility, hospitality, and practical labor. Still, the phrase carries something true about the shape of the day. Prayer and work are not separate islands. They are more like two paths, crossing again and again. After the night or early morning prayer, the community moves toward dawn. Lauds greets the first light. The sky outside the high windows grows slowly from dark blue to gray, then to a pale wash of gold. The bell rings again, and the day takes form. Prime marks the early morning, when duties begin to spread through the monastery. Some monks go to reading or study. Some prepare for tasks in the garden, bakery, or workshop. Some attend to the needs of the church. The same corridors that held lantern light now receive daylight, and the stones show their familiar colors. Terce comes when morning is settled. The bell gathers the community once more. Work pauses, a tool is set down, a quill rests beside a half-formed letter, a gardener brushes soil from his hands, footsteps return to the cloister path, measured and quiet. At sext, near midday, the light is strongest, shadows shorten in the courtyard. The bell speaks across the roofs, and again the monks come together. The repetition is gentle. It gives the day a clear center. None arrives in the afternoon when the sun has begun its westward leaning. By then, the monastery has known many small labors: pages copied, bread baked, herbs cut, floors swept, guests received, animals tended, meals prepared. Yet the bell does not ask what has been finished. It simply calls the community back to prayer. Vespers, the evening prayer, comes as the day softens. Light lies low across the cloister stones. Birds settle near the eaves. The garden cools. In the church, the chant rises again, calm and unforced, giving thanks for the day that has passed. Compline follows later, the final prayer before rest. Its name belongs to completion, to the closing of the circle. After Compline, many monastic communities keep a deeper quiet, sometimes called the Great Silence. Necessary sounds remain, whether on the roof, a footstep, a bell in the night, the breathing life of the buildings and fields. But unnecessary speech falls away, and so the day is held, not by exact minutes, not by modern clocks, but by light, listening, memory, and bells. The monks follow the same paths through darkness, dawn, midday, evening, and night. Their robes brush the same stone. Their voices return to the same psalms. Their footsteps repeat the same quiet journey. As the next bell fades into the morning air, it guides them once more toward the church, where candlelight waits, and the first prayer of daybreak is about to begin. Chapter 4. Morning in the Church. The bell has called through the dim corridors, and now the monks enter the church in a quiet line. The morning is still young. Outside, the fields and roofs of the monastery rest beneath a pale blue light, the kind that comes before the sun has fully risen. Inside the church, the air is cooler than the air beyond the doorway. Stone holds the memory of night. Each step on the floor sounds softly, then fades upward into the arches. The monastery church is the largest and most sacred building in the abbey. It is used not once, but many times each day. The monks come here for the cycle of prayer, for mass, for chant, and for the reading of psalms. A psalm is a sacred song or poem from the Bible, and in medieval monasteries, psalms shaped much of the rhythm of worship. They were repeated day after day, season after season, until their words seemed to belong to the very stones. At the eastern end of the church stands the altar, the sacred table at the front. It may be made of stone, covered with cloth, and set near candles or lamps. As dawn grows brighter, a faint wash of morning light begins to touch the high windows. The monks take their places in the choir stalls. Choir stalls are wooden seats where monks sit or stand during prayer. They are arranged so that the community can chant in turns, one side answering the other. The wood has been smoothed by many years of hands and sleeves. Some stalls are plain, while others in wealthier houses may be carefully carved. In this monastery, the carving is modest. Leaves, simple lines, perhaps a small flower tucked into the corner of a panel. Candles tremble in the stillness. Their flames are small, but in the early morning they seem generous. Beeswax gives off a clean, faint sweetness. Beeswax candles were valued in churches because they burned more clearly than cheaper candles made from tallow, which was animal fat. Not every candle in every monastery was beeswax, and wealth differed greatly from house to house. But near the altar and during important services, beeswax was often preferred. There may also be the scent of incense, a fragrant smoke used in worship. It moves slowly in the air, almost like a veil. It rises, thins, and gathers beneath the vaulted ceiling. In a church like this, even a small movement seems to have a soft echo. The walls may be simple or decorated depending on the monastery. In some Benedictine abbeys, painted walls, colored glass, carved stone, and bright cloths gave the church a rich and solemn beauty. In other communities, especially among the Cistercians, churches were often made more plain on purpose. The Cistercians valued simplicity in their buildings, with fewer images and less ornament. Medieval monasteries varied widely, and their churches reflected their rules, their resources, and their local customs. Here the church is neither bare nor splendid. It has stone arches, a few painted patterns near the altar, and high windows through which the morning slowly enters. If there is stained glass, it is not the great jeweled glass of the grandest churches, but smaller panes with muted color, a little blue, a little red, a little green. As the dawn strengthens, the glass gathers the light and lets it fall in softened patches across the floor. Then the chant begins. It does not rush. It rises from a single note, gathers into a line, and moves like breath through the choir. The monks chant in Latin, the language used in much of the Western medieval church. Some understand the words well through study and long repetition. Others know them through practice, sound, and memory. The chant is not a performance in the modern sense. It is prayer shaped into melody. This kind of singing is called plain chant. Plain chant means a single flowing melody, without the kind of harmony that later music often uses. There are no strong rhythms, no instruments needed, no sudden turns. The melody moves gently upward and downward, following the words. Gregorian chant is one of the best-known forms of medieval plain chant, associated with the worship of the Western Church. In a monastery, it becomes part of the day's landscape, as familiar as the bell, the cloister walk, or the sound of a page turning. The chant passes from one side of the choir to the other. A phrase is sung, then answered. The sound lingers beneath the arches. It touches the stone, returns softly, and fades. In the pauses, the church seems to listen. Morning prayer may be lauds, the prayer of dawn, though exact customs differ from place to place. In some seasons, the monks have already risen earlier for night prayer, sometimes called matins or vigils. Now as daylight gathers, lauds gives words to the coming day. The psalms move slowly, and the monks stand or bow according to custom. A lamp flickers near the altar. A monk turns a page carefully in a large service book. The parchment is thick and pale, made from prepared animal skin. The letters may be large enough for several monks to read from the same book. The page makes a faint sound as it settles. The monastery is not separate from the world in every way. Its prayers are enclosed within walls, yet the sound of its bell crosses fields and lanes. At appointed times, the church may receive guests, servants of the abbey, travelers, or local people, depending on the house and its customs. The light changes slowly. At first the church is blue-gray and candlelit. Then the tops of the arches appear more clearly. The edges of the choir stalls take on a warm brown. The altar cloth brightens. Dust, nearly invisible in darkness, begins to drift in the window light. A narrow beam reaches the floor and rests there, still and pale. The chant continues, rising and falling, never hurried. The monks know the pattern of standing, sitting, bowing, and listening. The body remembers what the mind no longer needs to measure. In this way, the church holds not only prayer, but time itself. Each office of the day returns to this place. Morning, midday, evening, and the final prayer before quiet all pass through the same doors. When the last phrases are sung, the sound does not end all at once. It thins into silence. The final note remains for a breath beneath the ceiling, then disappears into the stone. There may be more to come. In some monasteries, morning prayers are followed by Mass. In others, depending on season and local custom, the monks may go on to reading, study, or work. The day is ordered, but not every monastery follows exactly the same pattern. The rule of Saint Benedict gives a foundation, and each house lives it according to its own traditions, its climate, its duties, and the needs of its community. For a moment, no one moves. Then a wooden stall creaks softly. Sandaled feet shift on the cool floor. A candle flame leans and steadies. The monks begin to leave the choir in quiet order, passing beneath the arches and toward the doorway that leads back to the cloister. Outside, the morning has opened a little more. The covered walkway waits with its square of garden at the center. Pale light lies across the stones. The bell is silent for now, and the chant is faded, but its calm seems to remain in the air as the monastery turns gently toward the work of the day. Chapter 5. The Cloister Walk. From the church, a doorway opens into the cloister, and the air changes gently. The sound of chant fades behind thick stone walls. The light becomes softer. Footsteps settle into a slower rhythm. Here at the center of many medieval monasteries, the cloister forms a quiet square, a sheltered path wrapped around an open garden. A cloister is a covered walkway around a courtyard. In a Benedictine abbey like this one, it is both practical and peaceful. It joins the main parts of the monastery together: the church for prayer, the chapter house for daily meetings, the refectory for meals, the dormitory above or nearby, and the passages leading toward gardens, workshops, and other rooms. Again and again through the day, the monks cross this place, moving from one duty to the next. They know each stone underfoot. They know where the morning sun first touches the paving. They know where rain gathers at the edge of the roof, and where a small breeze passes through the arches on warm afternoons. The cloister is not far from work, or prayer, or meals, yet it feels like a pause between them. Let us begin a slow circuit. Along one side, the walkway runs beside the church wall. The stones are cool, even in summer. A line of arches opens toward the courtyard, each arch resting on a column. This row of arches is called an arcade. Through it, the open sky appears in measured spaces, one bright shape after another. Sunlight falls through the arcade and lies in pale squares on the floor. As the sun moves, the shapes move too, slowly crossing the paving stones. In the morning they are long and slanting. At midday they are smaller and clearer. In the late afternoon they grow golden and soft. A monk passes quietly, his wool robe brushing at his ankles. Another follows at a little distance, carrying a small book. In many monasteries, the cloister was a place where a monk might walk, read, reflect, or wait before the next office of prayer. It was quiet, though not always silent. There might be the turning of a page, the murmur of necessary words, the sound of a broom on stone, or the light scrape of a wooden bench. Above, under the covered roof, swallows may nest in the warm months. Their wings flick briefly across the open courtyard. Rooks call from the outer roofs. A dove settles somewhere high in the stonework. The monastery has its silences, but they are living silences, held among small sounds. At the center of the cloister lies the garth. A garth is the open garden or grass space inside the cloister square. In some monasteries it might be a simple lawn. In others it might hold herbs, a small tree, a fountain, or a well. Here the garth is modest: green grass, a narrow path, a low bed of herbs near the edge, and a young tree whose leaves stir lightly when the air moves. Rain has fallen earlier in the day. Drops cling to the leaves of sage and thyme. The scent of damp earth rises gently from the garden, mingling with the smell of stone after rain. The roof above the cloister walkway keeps the path dry. When rain comes again, it will patter softly on the tiles overhead and fall in threads from the eaves into the courtyard. The monks may pass beneath the shelter without haste, going from the church to the refectory, from the chapter house to their tasks, from work back to prayer. Now we turn the corner. On this side of the cloister, a doorway leads into the chapter house. The chapter house is the room where the community gathers, often each day, to hear a reading from their rule and to discuss matters of the monastery. The rule of Saint Benedict, written in the 6th century, gave guidance for a life of prayer, reading, obedience, and work. Customs differed from place to place, but in many Benedictine houses, this room had an important place in the daily pattern. The doorway is framed by stone worn smooth near the edges. Many hands have touched it over many years. The threshold is slightly hollowed from repeated steps. Near the arches, the columns have carved tops. The carved top of a column is called a capital. In some monasteries, capitals were plain and simple, shaped with clean lines. In others, they might show leaves, vines, animals, or figures from Scripture. Decoration varied widely, depending on the order, the wealth of the house, the region, and the taste of the builders. Here the capitals are mostly leaves. They curl upward in stone, quiet and patient, as if the garden has climbed into the architecture. A monk passing by may scarcely notice them, yet they are always there, receiving the light, holding the arches, marking the steady rhythm of the walkway. Step by step, the arcade continues. The cloister is a place between places. It does not belong only to one task. It is used by those going to prayer, those coming from a meal, those carrying tools, those walking with a book, those crossing in silence after a bell has sounded. The same path is taken many times in a day and many thousands of times across the years. There is comfort in such repetition. Footsteps answer footsteps. Morning follows evening. Rain follows sun. The stones remember the passing of the community, not as a story of haste, but as a long, quiet pattern. Ahead, on another side, lies the refectory, the dining hall. Near its entrance, some monasteries had a washing place where the monks could wash their hands before meals. Water might flow into a stone basin or be poured from a vessel. The sound would be small and clear, a brief brightness before the ordered silence of the meal. A bench stands under the covered walk. Its wood has darkened with age and touch. A monk may sit there with a manuscript, reading in the cool shade. Another may pause for a moment, looking across the garth at the changing sky. The cloister offers shelter without closing away the world. It has a roof, but it also has clouds. It has stone, but also grass. It gathers the monastery inward, yet leaves the center open to light. We turn again. This side leads toward the dormitory stairs and the ways into other parts of the abbey. In earlier Benedictine houses, monks often slept in a shared dormitory, and in some monasteries, the dormitory had direct access to the church for the night offices of prayer. The cloister helped bind these movements together. From rest to prayer, from prayer to reading, from reading to labor, the route passed again and again under these arches. A bell sounds somewhere beyond the roofs. It is not loud here, only rounded and distant, softened by stone and air. A few monks adjust their pace. One closes his book, another turns toward the church. The cloister receives their movement without disturbance. Robes brush softly, sandaled feet pass over the paving. The bell fades, and the arches hold the quiet after it. A patch of sunlight crosses a column. The stone is cool to the touch in the shaded part. Warmer, where the light has rested. The garth glimmers with droplets. A bird crosses the square of open sky, then disappears beyond the roofline. We complete the circuit slowly, returning near the place where we began. The church door stands behind us, and another doorway waits ahead, smaller and more withdrawn. Light falls across its threshold in a pale band. Beyond that doorway, the air will grow still in a different way. There will be desks, parchment, ink, and the soft sound of quills forming letters. The cloister has carried us gently between prayer and work, between open sky and enclosed room. For one more moment, we remain under the arcade, listening to the mild echo of footsteps, the faint drip of rain from the roof, and the quiet breathing of the garth at the monastery's heart. Chapter 6. Work in the Scriptorium. From the cloister walk, a quieter passage leads toward a room where light is treated almost like a tool. This is the scriptorium, a place for copying books by hand. The word simply means a writing room. Not every medieval monastery had a large formal scriptorium, and not every monk was trained as a scribe. Some houses kept only a small space for writing and repair, while wealthier abbeys might have several desks arranged where the daylight was best. Yet in a well-established monastery such as this one, the making and keeping of books is part of the gentle labor of the day. Before printing became widespread in Europe in the 15th century, books were slow things. Each page had to be prepared, ruled, written, checked, and sometimes decorated. A manuscript, meaning a handwritten book, could take weeks, months, or even longer, depending on its size and beauty. It was not rushed work. It asked for steadiness, clear eyes, careful hands, and a patient mind. The room is still, though not silent. There is the faint scratch of quills moving over parchment, the small shift of a sleeve, the soft tap of a page weight being set down. A smooth stone holds one sheet open on a sloping desk. Near another place, a strip of leather keeps several pages from curling. The air has an earthy smell, made of ink, parchment, dust, wax, and old wood. Parchment is the writing material used for many medieval books. It is made from prepared animal skin, often from sheep, goats, or calves. The skin is cleaned, stretched, dried, and scraped until it becomes pale and smooth enough to write upon. Fine parchment, often associated with calf skin, may be called vellum, though the exact use of that word varied from place to place. To the touch, a parchment page is not quite like paper. It has a living texture, smooth in some places, slightly grainy in others. One side may be softer, another a little firmer. The scribe knows these differences by long habit. Before any words are written, the page is ruled. Fine lines are marked to guide the writing, so each row of letters will rest evenly, like seed rows in a garden bed. Sometimes the lines are made with a faint point, sometimes with pale ink or lead. Margins are measured, columns are planned. A space may be left for a large opening letter, or for a painted decoration that will come later. At one desk, a monk bends over a page and forms each letter carefully. His pen is a quill, a writing tool made from a bird feather. The end has been cut into a nib, with a small slit to hold ink. Now and then the point must be trimmed again. The monk takes a small knife, turns the quill gently in his fingers, and sharpens it with a practiced motion. Then the feather returns to the ink, and the line continues. The ink in the little pot may be iron gall ink, made from oak galls and iron salts, darkening as it dries. Or it may be a carbon-based ink, made from soot or lampblack, mixed with a binding liquid. Different inks were known in different places and times. Here, the written words appear dark and steady against the pale surface. A letter begins as a slight pressure, then a curve, then a lift. One letter follows another. A word gathers, a sentence settles into place. The books copied here are not all the same. Many are religious texts, books for worship, psalms, prayers, gospel books, commentaries on the Bible, and writings of respected teachers. Some tell the lives of saints, others record legal matters, gifts of land, agreements, or the practical memory of the monastery's holdings. In some monasteries, scribes also copied works from classical authors, or texts on medicine, grammar, music, astronomy, and the calculation of church dates. The monastery did not hold all learning in the world, but it could preserve and pass on many kinds of writing, one page at a time. A scribe's work asks for attention. A mistake can happen even in a careful room. If a word is wrong, the surface may be gently scraped and rewritten, if the parchment allows it. Sometimes a correction is placed above the line or in the margin. The page itself becomes a record of human care, not perfect, but patient. Near the window, another desk holds small shells and bowls with color inside them. These colors are pigments, meaning colored materials used to make paint or ink. Some come from minerals in the earth, some from plants, and some from animal sources. They are ground fine and mixed carefully. Red, blue, green, yellow, and black wait in quiet portions, each covered or set aside until needed. Decoration in a manuscript is called illumination. The word suggests light, and in some books it is almost literal. A large first letter may be painted with curling leaves, small figures, or bright patterns. In costly books, thin sheets of gold leaf can be laid onto prepared areas so that the page catches the candlelight or the sun. Such work is beautiful, but it is also expensive. Illuminated manuscripts are not everyday objects in every monastery. Many useful books are plain, made for reading rather than display. Even a plain page, however, has its own quiet grace, in the regular lines and the dark rhythm of the script. The sunlight shifts slowly across the desks. It touches the edge of a parchment sheet, then the side of an ink pot, then the hand of a monk resting for a moment before beginning the next line. In this room, time feels measured not only by bells, but by letters. A bell may call the community to prayer, and the scribe will set down his quill. Later he will return, find the place again, and continue. By the later Middle Ages, many books would also be made in towns, in commercial workshops where professional scribes and artists worked for schools, churches, and private buyers. The monastery was only one part of a wider world of readers and bookmakers. But here within these walls, the work remains modest and steady. A text is received, copied, corrected, and kept. Knowledge travels forward quietly. One page now lies finished upon the desk. The ink is still drying. No one hurries it. The dark letters rest in their ruled lines, and a small unfinished space waits for a red initial. Beyond the window, the garden breathes in the afternoon air. The scent of ink lingers for a little while, then slowly gives way to the softer fragrance of herbs drifting in from outside. Chapter 7. The Monastery Garden. From the cool shade of the cloister, we step gently outward into the monastery's gardens. The change is quiet, but complete. Stone gives way to earth. The faint scent of wax and parchment is replaced by green leaves, damp soil, and herbs warming in the sun. A narrow path leads between low beds, edged with wood or stone, and the air carries the soft movement of bees, the rustle of leaves, and the distant sound of a wooden rake smoothing the ground. In many medieval monasteries, gardens were not just pleasant spaces. They were useful, carefully tended, and often deeply meaningful. A well-established abbey might have several kinds of gardens, each with its own purpose. There could be an herb garden for cooking and remedies, a vegetable garden for daily meals, an orchard for fruit, and the small cloister garden or garth at the quiet heart of the monastery. Some monasteries also had a cemetery garden, where herbs, grass, and simple flowers grew near the resting places of the community. Customs varied from region to region. A monastery in a damp northern valley would grow different plants from one in the warmer lands of southern Europe. Wealth, climate, soil, and the customs of the religious order all shaped the garden. Yet in many places the pattern was similar. Ordered beds, useful plants, patient hands, and a sense that the care of growing things belonged naturally to the rhythm of prayer and work. Here the first garden we enter is the herbery. A herbery is an herb garden, especially one where plants are grown for medicine as well as cooking. The beds are neat and low, divided by narrow paths where a monk or gardener can walk without stepping on the soil. Some plants grow in small mounds, others spill gently over the edges, their leaves silver, green, or deep blue-gray. A sleeve brushes against mint, and its cool fragrance rises at once. Nearby, thyme grows close to the ground, small-leaved and strong-scented. Sage spreads in soft, pale leaves. Fennel lifts feathery fronds toward the light. There may be parsley, rosemary, lavender, hyssop, and rue, depending on the climate and the custom of this house. Their names are old and simple, and many were known in kitchens, infirmaries, and household gardens across medieval Europe. Not every herb was used in the same way everywhere. Some flavored food, some were steeped in warm water, some were dried and stored in bundles, some were prepared in salves, oils, or mixtures believed to ease discomfort. The word medicinal means used for healing or for easing illness, and in the monastery, medicinal plants were often gathered for the infirmary, the place where sick or elderly monks were cared for. Medieval medicine was different from modern medicine. It combined practical experience with herbs, religious understanding, and an old theory called humoral theory. This theory taught that health depended on the balance of 4 bodily fluids, or humors. People in the Middle Ages believed that foods, seasons, temperatures, and medicines can help restore balance. We do not need to follow every detail of that belief to understand the care behind it. The gardener, the infirmerer, and the cook all paid attention to plants, seasons, warmth, moisture, and the needs of the body. A little farther on, lavender hangs in bundles beneath a sheltered roof, drying slowly in the shade. Its scent is clean and gentle. Leaves and blossoms are gathered at the right time, tied with cord, and kept for later use. In a world without electric light or modern pharmacies, the knowledge of when to plant, when to harvest, and how to store herbs mattered greatly. Beyond the herbery lies the vegetable garden. Here the beds are broader and more practical. Cabbages grow in rounded heads. Leeks stand in pale green rows. Beans climb or spread depending on their kind. Onions swell quietly beneath the soil. There may be peas, garlic, beets, turnips, or other seasonal crops. These vegetables help fill the monastery's bowls through the year. along with grains, legumes, bread, and whatever the season provides. They become pottage, a thick soup or stew often served in medieval households. They flavor broths, strengthen simple meals, and carry the taste of the garden into the refectory, the dining hall. The work here is steady and unhurried. A wooden rake passes over the soil, drawing it smooth. Water darkens the earth around young plants. Weeds are pulled before they take hold. Beds are turned, seeds are covered, and old leaves are carried away. The work is humble, but it is never empty. Each small task belongs to the larger pattern of the monastery: prayer, reading, labor, and care. Past the vegetables, the path opens into the orchard. An orchard is a place where fruit trees grow. In spring, apple blossom drifts in the mild air like pale flakes of light. In summer, leaves thicken and cast soft shade across the grass. Later in the year, apples, pears, plums, cherries, or nuts may be gathered, depending on the region. In wine-growing lands, some monasteries also cared for vineyards, though here we linger among fruit trees warmed by the sun. The orchard has its own slower rhythm. Trees are planted for more than one season. They require pruning, patience, and years of care. A young tree may be tended by hands that will not gather its fullest harvest. In this way, the orchard quietly teaches continuity. The community receives what others planted, and plants what others may later receive. Fruit could be eaten fresh in season, dried, stored, cooked, or used in sauces and festival foods. Nothing in the garden is only decorative, though beauty is everywhere. The curved branch, the green fruit, the bee moving from blossom to blossom, the shade beneath the leaves, all of it is useful, and all of it is also part of the monastery's peace. Near the orchard there may be an apiary. An apiary is a place where bees are kept. The bees move slowly over flowers, gathering nectar while the garden hums around them. Bees were valuable for two special gifts: honey and wax. Honey sweetened food in a time when sugar was rare and costly in much of Europe. It could be used in cooking, in drinks, and in small comforts prepared for the sick. Beeswax was especially prized for candles. Compared with cheaper tallow candles made from animal fat, beeswax candles burned more cleanly and with a finer scent. In the church, where candlelight mattered for prayer and ceremony, beeswax was particularly valued. So the bees connect the garden to the altar, just as the herbs connect the garden to the infirmary, and the vegetables connect it to the refectory. Nothing is separate here for long. The monastery is a pattern of linked places: soil to kitchen, blossom to hive, hive to candle, candle to church, herb bed to healing room, orchard to winter store. We return for a moment to the cloister garth, the small garden enclosed by the covered walkways. This garden may be simple: grass, a tree, a fountain or well, perhaps a few herbs or flowers. It is practical in its own way, bringing air and light into the center of the buildings. It also gives the eye a place to rest. From the shadowed walk, the monks can look inward to green growth and open sky. In some monasteries, gardens carried symbolic meaning as well. The enclosed garden could remind people of paradise, purity, or the soul kept in peace. Yet it was also a real place, with rain on leaves, soil under fingernails, and birds crossing above the courtyard. Medieval people often saw no sharp division between the useful and the meaningful. A plant could feed the body, scent a room, mark a season, and suggest a prayer. As the afternoon light softens, the garden settles into its quiet abundance. Mint and thyme release their fragrance where sleeves have brushed them. Lavender dries in patient bundles. Bees continue their work among the flowers. In the orchard, the fruit trees hold warmth from the sun. In the vegetable beds, cabbages, leeks, beans, and onions grow slowly toward the kitchen. A basket is lifted from the path. A few herbs are carried indoors. Somewhere beyond the garden wall, bread is cooling on a board, and a pot of pottage thickens over the hearth. The scents begin to mingle: green leaves, warm earth, wood smoke, grain, and broth. Following them, we leave the garden gently behind and turn toward the refectory, where the gifts of soil, season, and steady hands will become the monastery's evening meal. Chapter 8. Meals in the Refectory. From the cloister walk, a doorway leads toward one of the most ordinary and necessary rooms of the monastery, the refectory. The word refectory simply means the dining hall, the place where the community gathers for meals. In a well-established abbey, It may be a long stone room with high windows, plain walls, and wooden tables arranged in careful order. The benches are smooth from many years of use. The floor is swept. The air carries the gentle scent of bread, herbs, warm broth, and damp wool brought in from the cloister. Before the meal, the monks passed through a place for washing. Hand washing was a common custom before eating, both for cleanliness and for the ordered rhythm of the community. A stone basin may stand near the entrance, with water poured from a pitcher or flowing from a simple spout. One by one, the monks rinse their hands. The sound is small and clear, water touching stone, sleeves being lifted, footsteps moving onward. Inside the refectory, the tables are set with wooden bowls, cups, and spoons. In some houses, each monk may have his regular place. The arrangement reflects the life of the monastery itself, shared, orderly, and shaped by custom. There is no need for haste. The meal belongs to the same measured day as prayer in the church, work in the garden, and reading in the cloister. The food in medieval monasteries varied greatly. A large and wealthy abbey might have more resources than a small rural house. A monastery in northern Europe might serve different foods from one in Italy, France, or Spain. The season mattered too. Winter stores, spring greens, summer herbs, and autumn harvests all found their way to the table in their time. Still, many monastic meals were built around simple, steady foods. Bread was central. It might be made from wheat, rye, barley, or mixed grains, depending on the region and the wealth of the house. Loaves could be set to cool on boards after baking, their crusts giving off a warm, familiar fragrance. Bread was food, utensil, and comfort at once, used to accompany soups, vegetables, cheese, or fish. There might also be pottage. Pottage means a thick soup or stew, often made with grains, vegetables, beans, peas, or lentils. It could be plain or well-seasoned, depending on what the kitchen had at hand. Steam rises from the bowls in soft white threads. Leeks, onions, cabbage, parsley, and other herbs may lend their scent. Beans and peas give substance. Lentils make the broth hearty. A cook might stir the pot slowly over the fire, adding what the garden and storehouse have provided. Cheese and eggs could appear, though their use depended on the rules of the house, the season, and the church calendar. Fish was often important, especially on fast days. A fast day was a day with religious limits on certain foods. In many communities, meat was avoided on such days, and fish might be served instead. Monasteries near rivers, ponds, coasts, or managed fisheries had better access to fish than those far from water. The rule of Saint Benedict, the guide followed by many Western monks, restricted meat from four-footed animals for healthy monks. This did not mean that every monastery followed the rule in exactly the same way in every century. Customs changed, and interpretations differed. Some houses remained stricter, while others allowed more exceptions over time. The sick, elderly, or recovering monks in the infirmary might receive more nourishing foods, and in some cases meat was permitted for them. The purpose was care rather than indulgence, a quiet recognition that weakness required gentleness. Drink also varied with place. In northern regions, ale or beer made from grain was common. In wine-growing regions, wine might be served. Water, too, was drunk, and it is too simple to say that no one drank it. Medieval people used different beverages according to custom, availability, work, health, and season. In the refectory, a cup of barley ale, light beer, wine, or water might stand beside a wooden bowl, part of the ordinary pattern of the meal. Yet, the refectory was not only a place for eating. It was also a place for listening. During many meals, the monks ate in silence while one monk read aloud. At one side of the hall, a lectern stands. A lectern is a stand made to hold a book for reading. The reader may climb a few steps to a raised place, so his voice can carry gently across the room. The book might contain scripture, a saint's life, a commentary, or another approved text. The reader's voice is calm and even, rising and falling in the stone hall. The sound becomes part of the meal itself. Wooden spoons move quietly in bowls, bread is broken with care, cups are lifted and set down again. The reader continues, not hurried, each phrase given space. The monks listen as they eat, receiving words and food together. Silence here is not empty, it is attentive. It leaves room for the turning of a page, the soft echo of a sentence, and the faint rustle of wool sleeves along the table. At midday, the windows may be bright. Light falls in pale bands across the long tables, and rests on the rims of bowls. Dust drifts slowly in the air. Outside, the cloister garden holds its square of green, and beyond it the work of the abbey waits, herbs to gather, tools to mend, parchment to rule, animals to tend. At evening, the refectory has a different softness. The light is lower and warmer. The smell of bread seems deeper after the labors of the day. A bowl of pottage, a piece of cheese, a little fish, or vegetables from the garden may be received with quiet gratitude. The reader's voice settles into the room like the last daylight along the wall. When the meal is finished, bowls and spoons are gathered. Benches shift softly on the floor. The reader closes the book, and the lectern stands still again. The community rises in order, not as a crowd, but as a body accustomed to moving together. Some return toward the cloister. Others may have duties in the kitchen, the bakery, or the yard. Behind the refectory, the work of feeding the monastery continues. Ovens hold their fading warmth. In the brewhouse, grain waits for its next use. In the storerooms, beans, peas, flour, apples, onions, herbs, and salted fish are kept as carefully as the season allows. The meal has ended, but its quiet labor stretches outward through the abbey, into the hands of bakers, gardeners, brewers, servants, lay brothers, and monks. And so, from the long tables and the reader's gentle voice, the path of the day leads onward, back into the steady work that supports the life of the monastery. Chapter 9. Crafts, Labor, and Daily Tasks. Beyond the church, the cloister, the garden, and the refectory, the monastery continues in many smaller places of work. Here the life of prayer is joined to the life of hands. In the Benedictine tradition, manual labor has long been part of the ideal pattern of the day. Prayer, reading, and work are not separate worlds, but parts of one steady rhythm, each giving shape to the other. The bell still marks the hours. A monk may leave the cloister after prayer and cross toward the bakehouse. A lay brother may already be there, tending the oven. A lay brother is a member of the monastic community, who often has fewer duties in the long daily services and gives more time to practical labor. In some orders, especially among the Cistercians, lay brothers became very important in farming, building, and daily production. In larger monasteries, servants, tenants, and hired workers might also help with many tasks. A monastery could be a place of worship and study, but also a working household, with barns, workshops, mills, fields, and stores to maintain. In the bakehouse, the air is warm and close. Dough rests near the oven, rising slowly in wooden troughs. Flour dust settles on sleeves and tabletops. The baker's hands fold and turn the dough with a practiced motion, pressing it, shaping it, leaving it to swell again. Bread is one of the steady foods of the community, and baking follows its own quiet order. Loaves are set near the heat, then drawn out when the crust is firm and brown. The smell of warm bread travels softly through nearby passages, mingling with wood smoke and the cool scent of stone. Not far away, in many northern monasteries, there may be a brewhouse. A brewhouse is the place where ale or beer is made. Here grain is prepared for brewing. Malt, which is grain that has been moistened, allowed to begin sprouting, and then dried, waits in sacks or bins. The work is patient and earthy. Water is heated, grain is stirred. The sweet smell of malt rises with the steam. In wine-growing regions, the monastery might instead depend more on vineyards and cellars, with barrels of wine stored in cool rooms. Customs differ from place to place, shaped by climate, soil, and local practice. The monastery stores are watched carefully. In a well-established abbey, there may be granaries for grain, barns for hay, sheds for tools, and cellars for ale, wine, cheese, dried fruits, or salted fish. Some monasteries manage mills where grain is ground into flour. Others have fish ponds, orchards, vineyards, or flocks of sheep. These things require planning across the year. Spring brings planting and pruning. Summer brings haymaking and garden work. Autumn brings harvest and storage. Winter brings mending, sorting, grinding, and indoor crafts. The balance of labor changes with the season, just as the light changes in the cloister. Animals move quietly in their own rhythm. Sheep graze in a pasture beyond the buildings, their small bells sounding now and then in the open air. Oxen or horses may be kept for heavy work. Chickens scratch near straw and dust. Caring for animals means feeding, cleaning, guarding, and gathering what is needed from them. Wool from sheep becomes cloth. Eggs may go to the kitchen. Dung may enrich the soil. Nothing is only one thing in such a household. Each task supports another. In a room set aside for textile work, wool is prepared. Before spinning, wool may be carded. Carding means combing the wool fibers so they lie more evenly and can be drawn into thread. The soft pull of fiber through the cards is a repeated, calming motion. A spindle turns, thread gathers, cloth is woven, patched, or mended. Monks' garments, habits of wool, linens for the infirmary, cloths for the altar, sacks, covers, and simple household fabrics all need care. Some of this work may be done within the monastery, some may be done by others connected to its estates or nearby village. Yet the need is constant. Cloth wears thin, seams loosened, a careful hand restores them. In another workshop, candles are made. Light is precious in a world without electric lamps. Beeswax candles burn cleanly and are especially valued for the church, but they are costly. Cheaper candles might be made from tallow, which is rendered animal fat. Tallow gives a softer, smokier light, useful in humbler spaces. Wax or tallow is warmed near a flame until it softens. Wicks are dipped again and again, each layer cooling before the next is added. The work is slow. The candle grows by patience, as a manuscript grows line by line, or a field by furrow and season. The carpenter's bench smells of wood and sawdust. A plane smooths a board. Pegs are shaped. A stool is repaired. A door hinge is checked. The monastery is made of stone, timber, tile, plaster, iron, and roofing materials that vary with the building and the wealth of the house. All of it needs attention. Roofs must be watched after rain. Floors must be swept. Benches crack. Handles loosen. Gates sag. A broom moves across stone in long, even strokes. Dust gathers in a pale line and is carried away. Some labor is quiet and close, like the copying of books. A monk in the scriptorium bends over parchment, forming letters with a quill. This, too, is work of the hand. Not every monk is a scribe, and not every monastery produces grand illuminated books. Still, in many houses, reading and copying belong to the life of the community. The scratch of the pen, the sharpening of the quill, the turning of a page, these are part of the same ordered day as baking, brewing, gardening, and repair. The practical life of a monastery can seem simple when seen from afar, but it is made of many careful parts. A large abbey may be an important center of local production and land management. It may own fields worked by tenants, barns watched by stewards, mills used by nearby people, and workshops that serve both the community and its dependents. Yet within the walls, the daily feeling is often one of repeated tasks done at the proper time. Hands lift, fold, sweep, stir, mend, carry, and set down. When the bell sounds again, tools are laid aside where they can be found later. Dough is covered. A broom rests against the wall. A candle mold cools. The path leads back through the yard, past the scent of malt and bread, past wool drying on a rail, past the carpenter's shavings curled like pale leaves. Work pauses, not because it is finished forever, but because another part of the rhythm has arrived. In this way, labor is gathered into the wider pattern of the monastery. It feeds the table, warms the room, lights the church, clothes the body, repairs the roof, and fills the stores for another season. And from these workshops and barns, the path turns gently onward, toward the guest house, the infirmary, and the library, where the same patient hands will offer care, learning, and welcome. Chapter 10. Care, Learning, and Hospitality. Beyond the cloister and the workshops, beyond the garden beds and the warm smell of bread, the monastery opens another part of its life, the quiet work of care. In many Benedictine houses, hospitality was not an extra kindness, but a duty woven into the rule of the community. Hospitality means welcoming and caring for guests. The rule of Saint Benedict, the guide followed by many monks in Western Europe, taught that guests should be received with respect, especially the poor and pilgrims. A pilgrim was someone traveling for religious reasons, perhaps to visit a shrine, a saint's tomb, or a holy place far from home. So near the gate, or sometimes set a little apart from the inner buildings, there might be a guest house. It was a place where travelers could be received, without disturbing the more enclosed rhythm of the monks. A porter at the gate would speak with those who arrived, and a monk assigned to visitors might come forward with measured courtesy. Not every guest was received in the same way. Customs varied, and resources were not endless. A noble traveler, arriving with servants and horses, might be lodged in one part of the guest house. Poor travelers or pilgrims might be welcomed in a simpler room, perhaps with straw, blankets, bread, and a place near the fire. The monastery was ordered carefully, and hospitality had its own boundaries. Yet within those boundaries, there could be real gentleness, a bowl of pottage, a cup of ale or water, a piece of bread, a place sheltered from weather, and a few calm words at the doorway. Imagine a traveler coming in from a road silvered with late rain. His cloak is damp at the hem, and his boots carry the scent of mud and crushed grass. In the guest hall, a small hearth glows. He warms his hands near the fire, while steam rises from his sleeves. A brother brings a cup of warm broth, simple and savory. The room is plain with benches, a table, a chest for folded cloth, and perhaps a crucifix on the wall. Outside, the abbey bell sounds once across the yard, and the traveler lowers his voice without being asked. The monastery could also give alms. Alms are gifts of food, money, clothing, or help given to those in need. At some abbeys, bread was distributed at the gate. At others, certain leftovers or portions were set aside for the poor. The practice differed from place to place, but the idea was familiar. The monastery stood not only for prayer within its walls, but for service at its threshold. Care was also found in the infirmary. The infirmary was the place where sick, elderly, or recovering monks could be looked after. It was not a hospital in the modern sense. Medieval medical knowledge was limited, and ideas about illness were different from those of today. Care might include rest, warmth, diet, prayer, and preparations made from herbs. Some remedies were chosen from practical experience. Others came from the medical theories of the time. The monks did what they knew, with the tools and understanding they had. The infirmary was often quieter and somewhat more comfortable than the ordinary dormitory. In a large abbey, it might have its own small chapel, its own kitchen, and a nearby garden. The sick or elderly could receive food different from the regular monastic meal, sometimes richer or more nourishing. Even where healthy monks followed rules limiting certain foods, those in the infirmary might be given what was thought necessary for strength. Here, the air smells faintly of clean linen, dried herbs, and wood smoke. Bundles of lavender, sage, mint, or rosemary may hang from rafters, gathered from the herb garden in their proper season. A table holds folded cloths. A jug of water stands beside a wooden bowl. Somewhere, broth simmers gently in a small kitchen, and the sound is no more than a soft movement under a lid. An elderly monk sits near a window, wrapped in wool, watching pale light settle over the garden. Another rests beneath a linen sheet, while a brother moves quietly between them, carrying a cup, adjusting a coverlet, setting down a small dish. There is no hurry in the room. The care is practical, modest, and steady. Not far away, another kind of care is kept in wood and leather, parchment and ink. The monastery's books are gathered in a library, or in chests and cupboards, near the cloister or scriptorium. A large abbey might have many volumes, a smaller house only a few treasured texts. Books were costly, because each one had to be written by hand before printing became widespread in Europe in the 15th century. A monk opens a wooden book chest. The hinges give a low, familiar sound. Inside are manuscripts, handwritten books bound in leather or wrapped carefully in cloth. Many are religious works, scripture, commentaries, sermons, saints' lives, books for chant and worship. Some monasteries also kept grammar books, legal texts, medical writings, classical authors, or works on the natural world. Monasteries preserved and copied many important texts, though they were only one part of a wider world of learning that included cathedral schools, courts, towns, and later universities. Learning here is slow and attentive. A novice, someone training to become a monk, sits beside an older brother. On the table lies a wax tablet, a reusable writing surface coated with dark wax. With a pointed stylus, the novice traces letters, then smooths them away and begins again. He learns not only how letters look, but how the voice shapes them in reading, how Latin words are pronounced in chant, and how a page is held with care. Studies in a monastery might include scripture, theology, grammar, and music for chant. Some monks learned enough astronomy to understand the calendar, or computus, the medieval calculation used to determine the date of Easter and the cycles of the church year. Computus sounds complex, and it was, but at its heart it was a way of finding sacred time, counting moons, seasons, Sundays, and feasts, so the community could pray in harmony with the year. In the schoolroom or reading space, the light is gentle. A book rests on a lectern. A teacher's voice moves slowly through a passage, pausing to explain a word. The novice repeats it softly. Nearby, another monk studies a line of music, learning the rise and fall of chant. The notes are not like modern printed music, but signs that help guide the melody. All of it asks for patience: the letter, the sound, the memory, the breath. As the afternoon leans toward evening, the guest house grows still. Travelers settle their packs. The infirmary fire is tended. The book chest is closed, and the wax tablet is smoothed for another day. In each place, care has taken a different form. A doorway opened, a meal offered, a linen cloth folded, a page preserved, a young hand guided through its letters. Then the bell begins to call again, spreading its sound over roofs, gardens, and courtyards. The monks turn from their tasks with the same quiet rhythm that has carried them through the day. Guests lower their voices. The infirmary grows dim. In the library, the last light rests on leather and wood before fading. Soon the community will gather for evening prayer, and the monastery will move gently toward the final hours of the day. Chapter 11. Evening, Compline, and Rest. By evening, the monastery has softened. The strong light of day has moved beyond the outer fields, beyond the orchard rows, beyond the low hills, where the last brightness rests for a little while. The stones of the cloister, warmed by sun since morning, begin to cool. Shadows gather under the arches. In the garth, the small open garden at the center of the cloister, the leaves no longer shine sharply. They become gentle shapes in the dimming air. A bell sounds. Its note moves through the monastery slowly, crossing the church roof, the workshops, the kitchen yard, the garden walls, and the gatehouse. It passes over the barns and the guest house, and then drifts outward into the fields. For those who live here, the bell is not a surprise. It is part of the day's familiar pattern, like the turning of a page or the closing of a wooden door. This bell calls the community toward Vespers, the evening prayer. Vespers is one of the regular prayers of the divine office, the daily round of psalms and readings that shapes monastic time. In a Benedictine house such as this one, the hours of prayer have given form to the whole day. Early darkness, dawn, morning, midday, afternoon, and now evening. The exact timing changes with the season, because medieval time follows daylight more closely than modern clocks. In summer, evening stretches long and golden. In winter it comes early, blue and quiet. The monks move toward the church. Their steps are unhurried. Wool robes brush softly as they pass along the cloister walk. A few lamps have been lit, and their small flames make pools of amber against the stone. The passageways are not silent in the sense of being empty. There is the sound of sandals on paving. There is the faint creak of a door. Somewhere in the distance a bucket is set down, and a horse shifts in its stall. Yet over all of it lies a sense of order, as though every sound has been placed gently where it belongs. Inside the church the air is cooler. Candles burn near the altar, the sacred table at the east end. Their light trembles but does not hurry. The choir stalls, the wooden seats, where the monks stand and sit for prayer, hold the worn smoothness of many years. Day after day, season after season, hands have rested there, robes have gathered there, voices have risen there. The chant begins. It is low and even, a plain melody carried by many voices together. In medieval monasteries, much of this prayer is sung in Latin, the language of Western church worship. The words may be ancient, but the rhythm is familiar to those who sing them. A psalm is begun, and then another. A psalm is a sacred song or poem from the Bible, often used in prayer. The voices rise, pause, and answer. They move like a calm tide under the stone arches. Outside, the evening deepens. The kitchen fire is being banked. In the refectory, the dining hall, bowls have been cleared away. In the guest house, travelers settle into the quiet customs of the place. At the gate, the porter's duties become fewer as the road darkens. The outer doors are made secure, not with haste, but with the ordinary care of a household preparing for night. When Vespers is finished, the community does not rush. There may be a little time for necessary tasks, for a final movement between places, for the careful putting away of tools, books, or lamps. A candle may be pinched out between dampened fingers. A book may be closed and wrapped. A door may be drawn to, its wooden latch settling with a soft sound. Then, later, comes Compline. Compline is the final office, the last prayer before rest. The word itself carries the idea of completion. The day's work has been done. The meals have been taken. The tools are in their places. The last light has gone from the high windows, and the church now belongs to candlelight, shadow, and low voices. Compline is quieter than the busy middle of the day. The prayers are shorter and more inward. The chant is simple. It does not fill the church with grandeur so much as gather the community into stillness. A lamp glows. A sleeve moves. Someone turns a page with care. The stone beneath the feet holds the coolness of night. After Compline, in many monasteries, begins the Great Silence. The Great Silence is the quiet period after the final prayer, lasting until morning. It does not mean that no sound exists. Medieval buildings breathe with weather and wood and animals. A shutter may tap lightly in the wind. Rain may begin on the roof tiles. A bell may sound later for night prayer. Footsteps may be needed. A few necessary words may be spoken by those with duties to perform. But unnecessary speech falls away. The monastery becomes a place of listening. Bell, breath, stone, wool, darkness, silence. The monks leave the church in order. Their path may lead from the church to a stairway, and then to the dormitory, the shared sleeping room. In many earlier Benedictine houses, monks slept in such a common space, arranged simply and watched over by the customs of the community. In some monasteries, the dormitory had direct access to the church, so that the monks could rise for night offices, especially matins or vigils, without crossing far through the cold. The stair is wooden, polished by many feet. It gives a quiet sound beneath each step. At the top, the dormitory is dim. A lamp may remain burning through the night, a small steady flame in a sheltered place. The beds are simple. They may be narrow wooden frames, or low places with straw, or another plain mattress, depending on the period, wealth, and local custom. Wool blankets lie folded or drawn up. Linen may be used where it is available. The air carries the faint scents of wool, wood, lamp oil, and the cool stone walls nearby. Monks might sleep clothed or partly clothed, according to rule and custom, ready to rise again when the bell calls them. Later in the Middle Ages, some monasteries developed more private sleeping arrangements, with partitions or separate cells, especially as customs changed. But in a house like this, the shared dormitory still expresses something of the common life. Many people living by one pattern, under one rule, moving through prayer, work, reading, and rest together. One by one, the small sounds fade. A blanket is drawn into place. A wooden frame settles. A last footstep crosses the floor. The lamp continues to burn. Outside, the cloister is nearly dark. Moonlight lies in the corridor in pale strips, where it enters through the arcade. The garth is now a square of shadow. The central well or fountain is only a shape. Along the roofline, birds are still. In the distance beyond the walls, a dog may bark once, and then grow quiet. The fields rest under the night air. The road to the gatehouse is empty. Silence settles like soft cloth. It covers the cloister stones, the refectory benches, the closed books in the library, the herb beds in the garden, and the cooling ovens near the bakehouse. It lies over the guest house, where travelers rest from the road. It lies over the infirmary, where a lamp may burn beside clean linen and a cup of broth. It lies over the church, where candles have been lowered or put out, and only a small light may remain. Yet the silence is not an ending. It is part of the rhythm. Later, before dawn, the bell may call again. Matins, also called vigils in some customs, may bring the monks from the dormitory back down the stair and into the church, while the world outside is still dark. This night waking is not treated as an interruption so much as another step in the circle of monastic time. The same feet will cross the same stone. The same voices will find the same psalms. The same walls will hold the chant and let it fade. For now, the monastery is still. Bell, breath, stone, wool, darkness, silence. The day has narrowed to a lamp flame and a quiet room. The work of the hands has paused. The books are closed. The garden paths are hidden. The tools wait on their shelves. The bells are quiet until their next appointed hour. Beyond the monastery walls, the night widens across the countryside. It touches the orchards, the sheep pastures, the low hills and the dark edge of the woods. It rests on fields that will change with the year. Spring green, summer gold, autumn brown, winter white. And through all those seasons, the same bells will sound, calling the community from prayer to work, from work to prayer, from evening into quiet, and from quiet toward the first pale light of morning. Chapter 12. Seasons around the monastery. Around the monastery, the year turns slowly, as surely as the bell sounds across the fields. In a medieval abbey such as this one, life follows more than one calendar. There is the church calendar, the yearly pattern of feasts, fasts, and holy seasons. It marks Advent before Christmas, Lent before Easter, the great festivals, the saints' days, and the quieter weeks between them. Alongside it runs the agricultural year, shaped by soil, weather, animals, planting, and harvest. The two calendars meet each other every day. Prayer rises in the church, while beyond the walls the fields grow green, golden, bare, and green again. Customs differ from region to region. A monastery in England does not have quite the same seasons as one in Italy or the German lands. A house among vineyards has different tasks from one near sheep pastures or northern barley fields. Yet in many monasteries the changing year alters the same simple things: the amount of daylight, the work to be done, the food on the table, the warmth of rooms, and the hour at which shadows gather in the cloister. In spring, the abbey seems to breathe outward. Rain falls softly on the cloister tiles, tapping along the roof and running in small threads down the stone gutters. The central garth, the open green space inside the cloister, brightens after the dull colors of winter. Grass thickens, small plants appear close to the earth. The branches of fruit trees begin to carry pale buds, and then blossoms light as breath, open in the mild air. Beyond the inner buildings, the gardens are made ready. Soil is turned with steady labor. Seeds are set into beds for beans, onions, leeks, cabbages, and herbs, according to climate and local custom. Vines are pruned where vines are grown. Orchard trees are trimmed. In nearby pastures, lambing may bring new life to the flocks, and the sound of sheep carries faintly in the morning air. The bell still calls the monks to the divine office, the daily cycle of prayers, but the light changes around each calling. Dawn comes earlier. The path from dormitory to church is less dark. In the church, the chants of the Easter season are heard, for Easter is the great spring feast in the Christian year. Candles burn beside the altar, but the windows gather more daylight now, and the stone arches lose some of their winter dimness. The work of spring is quiet and hopeful. A gardener smooths soil with a wooden rake. A lay brother checks a fence near the orchard. A monk in the infirmary garden gathers the first useful leaves of the season, according to the knowledge and beliefs of his time. Herbs may be dried, steeped, or mixed into soothing preparations. Their scents rise gently when touched: mint, thyme, sage, parsley, fennel, or whatever grows well in this place. By summer, the monastery is full of light. The days are long, and the sun lingers over the roofs and fields. The cloister walk is striped with brightness, the arcade laying bands of shadow across the paving stones. Bees move slowly among the flowers in the herb garden. They are valuable small creatures, for honey sweetens food, and beeswax makes fine candles, especially for use in the church. Summer brings work in the open air. Haymaking begins when the grass is ready. Cut grasses dry in the sun and are gathered for animals to eat in colder months. In the gardens, herbs are cut and bundled. Some hang from rafters to dry, filling a room with a green, warm fragrance. Vegetables grow in rows, and fruit begins to swell on the trees. The long daylight affects the shape of the day. Before modern clocks were common, time was often understood by light, bells, observation, and local custom. The hours of prayer remained, but the feel of them changed with the season. Evening prayer, called vespers, comes while the world may still be bright. Compline, the final prayer, may arrive with a softer and later dusk. The work hours can stretch with the sun, though the bell still gathers the community back into its familiar order. In the scriptorium, if this abbey has one, summer light may be especially welcome. A page can be seen more clearly. A quill moves over parchment. A book rests open under a weight. Yet even in summer, the monastery is not only a place of work. There are pauses of chant, reading, meals, and walking under the cloister roof. The rhythm remains balanced, at least in its ideal. prayer, study, labor, and quiet return. Then comes autumn, with its deep colors and full hands. The word harvest means the gathering of crops when they are ripe. In autumn, harvest gives much of the monastery's outer life its shape. Grain is cut and brought into barns, where the golden stalks are stacked and stored. Apples and pears are gathered from the orchard. Nuts may be collected. In wine-growing regions, grapes are picked and pressed. Root vegetables are lifted from the earth and kept for colder days. The barns smell of straw and dry grain. The storehouses grow fuller. Apples are laid carefully in cool places. Pears, nuts, beans, onions, and roots are stored according to local practice. Herbs gathered earlier may be dried and put away. The kitchen begins to draw more often on what can be preserved, kept, or slowly used. Autumn light is gentle on the monastery walls. It lies low across the cloister and warms the stone for a little while, before evening. Leaves gather in corners of the courtyard. Rain returns more often, pattering on tiles and darkening the wooden doors. The bell sounds through mist, and the monks cross from church to refectory, from chapter house to workroom, along paths they have walked in every season. The church calendar moves too. Saints' days pass. Fasts and feasts give a sacred pattern to the weeks. The agricultural year brings food into storage, while the liturgical year, the year of worship, turns inward toward the darker months. Both are remembered in chant, in readings, in meals, and in the quiet discipline of daily life. Winter arrives slowly at first, and then settles over the abbey. The days shorten. Frost whitens the roof tiles in the morning. In some regions, snow muffles the outer courtyard and softens the sound of footsteps. The fields lie still. The garden beds are mostly bare, though some hardy plants may remain. Smoke rises from chimneys. The stone corridors are cold. Many medieval buildings were not warmed by modern standards. Heating was limited, and fuel had to be gathered, stored, and used with care. A monastery might have a calefactory, a warmed room where monks could spend limited time. The word calefactory simply means a place for warming. It might be one of the few heated spaces available to the community. There, hands could be held near the fire for a short while, before returning to other duties. Winter work moves indoors when it can. Cloth is mended. Wool is spun or prepared. Tools are repaired. Candles are made or carefully used. Books may be read in whatever light is available. The value of candlelight becomes clear in the dark season. Beeswax candles burn cleaner and brighter than cheaper tallow candles, which are made from animal fat, but wax is more costly. In the church, candle flames shine steadily against stone, and chant fills the cold air with a slow, human warmth. Advent comes before Christmas. It is a season of waiting and preparation in the church calendar. The abbey observes it through prayer, readings, and the familiar pattern of the office. Then Christmas arrives in the depth of winter, when daylight is brief and the lamps seem especially precious. The monastery may be cold, but it is not without beauty. There is the glow of candles, the scent of wood smoke, the sound of psalms, and the soft movement of the community through the cloister. Throughout the year, the same places receive different light. The gatehouse sees spring mud, summer dust, autumn leaves, and winter frost. The porter opens the gate to travelers in every season, as resources and custom allow. The refectory table changes with what the stores can provide. Fresher greens in growing months, preserved foods in colder ones, bread always central where grain is available, and drink suited to region and habit. The infirmary garden sleeps, sprouts, blooms, and is cut back again. The scriptorium brightens and darkens with the sun, and always the bell returns. It rings over plowed earth and blossoming orchards. It rings over bees in the herbs and hay drying in the fields. It rings over grain in the barns, apples in storage, frost on tiles, and snow in the courtyard. Its sound gathers the community from garden, workshop, library, kitchen, and cloister. It marks not only hours, but continuity. As evening comes at the end of our visit, the monastery grows quiet once more. The last light fades from the western sky. The cloister stones cool beneath the arches. A candle is carried along a corridor, its flame small and steady. Somewhere a door closes gently. In the church, the final chant softens into silence. The seasons will continue to turn around the abbey. Spring rain will return to the tiles. Summer bees will return to the flowers. Autumn grain will return to the barns. Winter candlelight will return to the darkened church. And through it all, in prayer and work, in study and service, in stone, garden, bell, and song, the life of the monastery goes on in its calm, repeating rhythm.